Happy 4th of July, Brent. I'm making this video because you asked me to brain to brain. First of all, I'm going to explain why I believe that brain to brain communication really exists. Let's take Gerard Butler. I was introduced to brain communication in the spring of 2003. Vladimir Putin, I heard his voice in my mind. Up until then, I just was relying solely on intuition and my guts and my brains to determine what was going on with Vladimir. But I actually heard a voice in my brain around 2003, and Vladimir said, I've just discovered a new way to communicate with you, Gail. He said, it's brain to brain, and I could hear his voice, and I thought, wow, this is something. And he said, I want you to go to your room, and I want to make love to you. And I thought, wow. Vladimir Putin had me go to my room, and he introduced me to brain loving. He was a very tender and passionate lover to me, and that's the way Vladimir's always been. And then after that, Vladimir and I started a regular brain-to-brain communication, and I've noticed the personality of the brain-to-brain voice is pretty consistent, which indicates that it is it's the same person, that there's a real person communicating to me in my brain. And a lot of the information that he's given me, I've found over the years, has been consistent with what has later been revealed to me with actual online communications that I've had with him. Some of the technology that he's educated me about that the Jesuits have is pretty wild and hard to believe. Like some of their, I figured out that they had mind reading technology back in 2002 when I was thinking something that I knew the Jesuits didn't like, and then all of a sudden I heard this nervous commotion outside. It was like I could tell the Jesuits were getting nervous about something. I use a lot of intuition in dealing with Jesuits because I've had to do that. It's a survival skill. So let's go back to Gerard Butler. Let's just give you examples of how I know this brain-to-brain communication really works. In 2008, after I watched Phantom of the Opera, Brent asked me if I would temporarily allow Gerard Butler to be my brain-to-brain lover, that he was very impressed with him, that he introduced him to me as a psychiatrist. And I thought, he's a psychiatrist? And we certainly don't get that impression about him. He said, oh, yes, and he's got genius intelligence. He's a psychiatrist and an MD. So Gerard and I had for about a month or so, we were brain-to-brain communicators and lovers, and he was the psychiatrist. He was telling me how he uses his psychiatric practice and all sorts of things about his philosophies as a psychiatrist, and he's quite an impressive man and very smart. What's really interesting is when Gerard Butler finally did start writing to me through email, he introduced himself to me as the doctor is in. And as the psychiatrist, I thought, oh, wow, what I've been hearing brain to brain is accurate all along. What's really funny is I never even discussed with Brent about Gerard Butler. He just popped up out of the blue and said, the doctor is in, and he introduced himself as a psychiatrist. And, you know, when Brent started communicating with me online, we didn't even discuss Gerard Butler. And I didn't even tell Brent what he had told me years earlier about Gerard Butler being a psychiatrist. So that's what I'm saying, man. And Gerard Butler just popped online and said the psychiatrist is in. I thought, wow, that's exactly what I was told brain to brain. Let's take Brent Spiner. Brent Spiner went to medical school, UCLA, and he told me that brain to brain. And you don't get this information about Gerard Butler being a psychiatrist or Brent Spiner being a doctor online because they don't advertise this stuff online. So, and then he even told me which medical school he was going to, UCLA, and that he was interested possibly in going into gynecology as a specialty. And I used to say, I would tell Brent brain to brain, gynecology? You really feel comfortable dealing with all those pregnant women? And Brent would say, yeah, that interests me. She said, I'm not sure, but I'm thinking about doing it. Well, what's really funny is when Brent and I first started our online communication, I didn't really talk to him a whole bunch about what he told me in the past, brain to brain, about going to UCLA med school and there's a gynecology and all that. But when Jesus Christ came on Skype, and I said, is it true, Jesus, that Brent was thinking about gynecology at UCLA Med School, and Jesus said, yeah, that's true. He did think about that for a while. And I thought, wow. You may say, well, maybe he's just agreeing with you. No. I really don't believe that. See, this is just one of many instances where later on, as I go down the road of my life, I get verification that things I was told brain to brain earlier is correct. I mean, like Gerard Butler, he just popped up out of the blue, introduced himself as the doctor. I didn't discuss with anybody about Gerard Butler being a psychiatrist. And he just pops up online and introduces himself as the doctor is in. The only way I could have known that was brain to brain. That's what I'm talking about. Same with Brent Spiner being a doctor in UCLA Med School. This brain to brain communications really works. Now, we do get imposters get in there and they confuse the issues, but it does work. You may say, how do you know that was really Brent Spiner who spoke to you on the phone in 1991, that it wasn't somebody who was impersonating him? Well, I didn't believe it at first. When I first heard the voice, I hung up on him because I thought it was a criminal rapist. But I noticed he was a very polite criminal rapist. And he never really came across threatening, which kind of confused me. So, but the way I figured out it was Brent is when my friend sent me a tape in the mail. Old Yellow Eyes is back, Brent Spiner's music album. And I thought, when I listened to that music, I thought, oh my God, that voice on the tape, that's the same voice that was talking to me on the phone. It's Brent Spiner. I thought, oh my God, Brent Spiner wants to make love to me. That's how I figured out. The voice was an exact match. The voice not only matched Brent Spiner with the same tone and everything, but it actually had the personality. The personality of the voice on the phone matched the personality of Brent in the music album. It was an exact match. If he was an imposter, all I can say is he must have got a recording of the real Brent Spiner's voice and put it up there on the phone, because that's how close the match was. I'm convinced it was Brent Spiner. Another thing. During that time, Star Trek The Next Generation aired an episode called The Drumhead. Okay? When I saw that, at that time I was writing Brent Spiner letters maybe once or twice a month describing my horrors with the child abuse industry, that I was worried about losing my son. Well, in that Star Trek The Next Generation episode, it was like they had delved into my heart and soul, and it was all about being harassed by the state and being picked on when you're innocent. And the whole episode was about that, but that was Brent Spiner who put that up there. He's reading my mail. The Drumhead episode, Star Trek The Next Generation, made me suspect that Brent Spiner was not throwing my mails in the trash. He was reading my mail. And then later, about a year later, he actually called me on the phone and made love to me on the phone. He did ask to come over, and I turned him down, which was one of the hardest things I ever did. Okay, that's why I believe that was the real Brent Spiner that's been in my life since 1990 and 91. Another thing that happened, December 93. I had an incident that happened in my Linwood, Washington apartment, and we were living on the first floor. And there was a soft knock on my front door. My son came to me and said, Mom, somebody just whispered your name at the door. Well, and I went to look through the peephole, and there was nobody there. So I thought, let's go out to the window. I went to my son's room and looked out the window. There was a white, sparkling clean white truck out there. It looked like it had been rented or something. There was a man in there with dark hair and a mustache. But he was very handsome. And I looked at him real close. It looked like Brent Spiner with a wig and a mustache. And I believe he was doing a play there called Every Good Boy Deserves a Favor. And it looked like him, but in costume. He flashed his lights off inside his car, on and off, so I could look at him. And I thought, oh my God, that's Brent Spiner. He actually came to my apartment in this white truck. I guess he flew in from LA or something, or San Francisco. And he was there in my parking lot and flashing the lights off. Right? I saw him. And then I thought, oh, he's here. And then he just took off like a lightning bolt and left. I couldn't get plate number or anything. I wasn't trying to do that anyway. I didn't want to get him in trouble. That was Brent Spiner. He actually came to my apartment. That's why I know. So you sure was it looked like him. He flashed his lights on so I could see him. And then a month later, I got this letter from that Paramount lawyer. She was a Jesuit lawyer who said that I was forbidden to write them. Apparently the Jesuits didn't like it that he actually came to my apartment. That's why I'm convinced that I've had the real Brent Spiner in my life. Also, Gates McFadden and LeVar Burton's voice I heard on my phone. The Gates McFadden called me up one time and said, ooh, I recognized her voice. Brent was putting his co-stars on the phone. His Star Trek The Next Generation co-stars. LeVar Burton was very respectful. So I heard their voices on my phone. You say, are you sure? Yes! Those were his co-stars. I know I heard Gates McFadden one time, and I know I heard LeVar Burton. Okay? That's why I know I've had the real Brent Spiner in my life. Also, in December 1996, Brent was going through horrors with Laurie McBride. Because that was the time I figured out he had Laurie McBride in his life, and I was really confused about her. So I dumped Brent Spiner as a lover, as a long-distance lover, and replaced him with Franco Nero. Well, I believe that Laurie McBride tried to seduce Franco Nero because the Jesuits were threatened that I had another celebrity in my life. And when I looked at the Germany photos of Brent with Laurie, the Jesuits have removed all these pictures from that, but he looked at her like he was horrified at her. You could tell that there was something very unhealthy about his relationship. He was looking right at her, and it was like he couldn't stand her. And she had this look on her face like, you could tell that Franco Nero had definitely called. I concluded from looking at those photos that Franco Nero had contacted Brent and informed him that Laurie McBride tried to seduce him. And that Laurie McBride was lying and claiming that Franco tried to rape her or something to that effect. And I could tell that Brent didn't believe it, and he was looking at her like she was the most wicked, vile woman on the planet. And I thought, why does he keep this woman as his girlfriend when she's like this? And then later, those pictures have all been removed. But see, it's bits and pieces, stuff like this that's convinced me